It was the year 2179, and Earth had long since stopped being the cradle of humanity. The once proud planet was now a war-torn ruin, battered by wave after wave of alien invasions. Each of these hostile species had come, intending to wipe out humanity for reasons that remained a mystery. Earth's governments, broken and fractured, could offer little in the way of a meaningful defense. Each battle, though fought with courage, ended in defeat. But then came the Vorlith, an alien race of godlike intelligence, near-immortal lifespan and overwhelming military might. They were different. Where the others had desired conquest, the Vorlith were bent on complete eradication. No mercy. No negotiation. Just annihilation. As their fleet entered Earth's solar system, the remaining governments, unable to even unite under a single banner, scrambled to muster a defense. There were no grand armies or fleets of ships to challenge the enemy. Instead, Earth's last hope rested on the shoulders of a desperate few, the newly formed Solace Division. Solace Division was not your typical military unit. They were humanity's final experiment, a desperate gamble by the most brilliant minds left on Earth. A group of survivors had been selected from the last remaining bastions of civilization, armed with the cutting-edge technologies humanity could barely comprehend. Each individual was an expert in their field: military strategy, bioengineering, robotics, artificial intelligence, and even quantum computing. Yet, no matter their expertise, they were all under no illusion. The Vorlith had their numbers, their overwhelming force, and their near-limitless technology. Humanity's chances seemed infinitesimally small. The mission was simple on paper: infiltrate the Vorlith flagship and find a way to disable their ability to wipe out humanity for good. However, the more they delved into the task, the more insurmountable the odds seemed. Every plan, every theory, every piece of intelligence they gathered led to the same conclusion: failure was inevitable. Commander Erica Hayes, leader of the Solace Division, stood before the holographic display, watching as Earth's final defense fleet, pitiful in comparison to the alien armada, prepped for what could only be described as a suicide mission. Despite her steely demeanor, the weight of the situation hung heavily on her. She had no illusions about the outcome. The Vorlith were simply too powerful. Humanity's brief, chaotic history had only produced a handful of true warriors, and none of them were on the battlefield today. The stakes were too high for even the bravest to believe in their survival. Her eyes flickered over to the faces of her team. They were young, for the most part, fresh-faced recruits who had not experienced the hell that war had become. And yet, they were Earth's final hope. If they failed, humanity would be wiped from existence, consigned to nothing more than a footnote in the history of the universe. "Commander," came the voice of Lieutenant Cale Draven, a bioengineer who had helped design the core weapons of Solace Division. His voice was unshaken, but there was a hint of doubt, the kind that could only come from facing an enemy with no hope of defeating them. "Are we sure this is worth it? We're up against a species that could make dust out of us in a blink. The fleet can't even get close to their flagship." Erica turned to face him, her expression cold but resolute. "We don't have a choice, Cale. If we don't try, then everything we know and everything we are, it's all for nothing. We fight because it's the only thing left to do. If we die, at least it won't be without giving everything we have." "But..." Cale hesitated, then looked away as if not wanting to voice his doubts. He understood that sentiment too well, though. The question lingered in the air: could humanity truly rise against the Vorlith? Or was their defeat written in the stars? The answer, as they soon discovered, was as unpredictable as the humans themselves. As the countdown to the launch of their final mission began, a strange occurrence swept through the ship. Communication systems began to glitch, and the crew noticed anomalies in the way their navigation systems behaved. At first, they thought it was a simple error, the result of too much tension. But then they realized it wasn't an error at all. The Vorlith, for all their advanced technology, were not invincible. The glitches in their systems weren't mere technical problems, they were sabotage. Someone had infiltrated the alien fleet. And that someone had sent them a message: "Help us. We are the last of your kind. Come and we will show you the way to victory." The message hung in the air, filling every room of the ship with silence. It made no sense. A shadowy figure, from within the Vorlith, a race that had conquered countless civilizations, now reached out to help humanity. Who could possibly believe it? "Is it a trap?" Cale asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I don't know," Erica replied, her gaze steely. "But we're taking that chance." The Solace Division's mission just got far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The last line of defense against extinction was now at the mercy of a strange, unexpected alliance. The message from within the Vorlith fleet had ignited a spark of hope, but it had also introduced a dangerous uncertainty. Commander Erica Hayes stood in the war room, surrounded by her team, each face lit by the soft glow of the holographic projector that displayed the encrypted transmission. "Help us. We are the last of your kind. Come and we will show you the way to victory." Those words repeated in Erica's mind, both impossible and urgent. Who could have sent the message? Was it a trap? The Vorlith were merciless, methodical, and their technology far surpassed anything humanity had ever dreamed. A traitor within their ranks? Or a new weapon in their arsenal? "Commander, we can't just blindly trust this," Lieutenant Cale Draven said, his voice laced with skepticism. "The Vorlith aren't known for showing mercy, let alone helping us. If this is some kind of psychological warfare, they've already won." Erica nodded slowly, her mind racing. She had fought for years to keep her team alive, to preserve what little was left of humanity's resolve. But now this new mysterious variable threatened everything. "We have no choice," she said, her tone firm. "We're being given a sliver of hope and we're going to take it. Even if it's a trap, we can't let the Vorlith wipe us out without a fight. I'll have a team ready to infiltrate their fleet. We're taking the risk." The room fell silent. Every single person in that room understood what was at stake. The mission to infiltrate the Vorlith flagship was already a suicide mission, and now they had to add another layer of uncertainty. A potential traitor, an unknown ally from the very species that had wiped out entire civilizations. Erica turned to the tactical display, which now showed a detailed map of the Vorlith fleet's positioning. Their flagship, the Atheron, was in the center of a heavily fortified formation. It was a massive, imposing craft, its surface gleaming with unknown alloys that defied human comprehension. Its firepower could obliterate Earth's remaining defenses in mere seconds. "If we're going to do this," Erica said, her voice unwavering, "we need to get inside the Atheron. We need to find out who sent this message and what they want. If this is an opportunity, we need to grab it." Her team nodded, but the unease was palpable. They weren't just heading into enemy territory, they were heading into the unknown. What if they were walking into an ambush, or worse, a trap that would expose all their weaknesses? "I volunteer to lead the infiltration," said Captain Mia Tran, a skilled pilot and former intelligence officer. "We'll need a small strike team, quick and stealthy. No room for error." Erica glanced at her team. She trusted Captain Tran with her life, but there were too many unknowns. "You're in charge, Mia. But I want to know exactly what we're walking into. Any sign of a trap and we pull back immediately." Captain Tran gave a sharp nod, and the preparations began. While the infiltration team prepared for their daring mission, the rest of the Solace Division focused on defending the remaining human fleet. They would engage the Vorlith long enough to provide a distraction. It was a hopeless strategy, but in war, hope was often the most dangerous weapon of all. The infiltration team, composed of Captain Tran, Lieutenant Cale Draven, and 3 other specialists, each an expert in espionage, hacking, or combat, boarded a stealth shuttle. Their goal: infiltrate the Atheron, locate the mysterious informant, and learn whether the message was genuine or a trap. The shuttle cut through space like a blade, cloaked by every countermeasure humanity could afford. As they approached the Vorlith flagship, the immense size of the Atheron loomed larger. It was more than just a ship, it was a fortress in space, a symbol of the Vorlith's dominance. No one could truly fathom what lay inside, what systems it contained, or how it might bend space itself to its will. "We're about to find out," Captain Tran muttered, her eyes fixed on the ship ahead. The shuttle slipped into the belly of the Atheron, using an ancient trick, hijacking an unused docking bay, one that had been abandoned for years. They silently entered the docking bay, moving like ghosts. The team disembarked, weapons ready, but nothing stirred. The Vorlith had been monitoring the area, but there was no sign of immediate danger. "We have one shot at this," Cale whispered as they moved through the deserted corridors. "If this goes south, we pull out," Captain Tran interrupted, her eyes scanning every corner. "Fast." The interior of the Atheron was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Vast, cavernous spaces stretching for miles in every direction, filled with strange alien architecture. Smooth walls of shifting materials that seemed to defy physics, and halls that bent light itself. The team moved cautiously, knowing that the slightest mistake could bring their untimely end. "Where's the contact?" Cale asked, his voice tight. Just as the question left his lips, a figure stepped out from the shadows, cloaked in a flowing garment that shimmered like liquid metal. It was humanoid in shape, but its features were hard to make out. The figure stepped closer, its face now visible, human, yet marked with strange, intricate tattoos that seemed to pulse with energy. "I am Calyx," the figure said, voice deep and resonant. "I am the last of my kind. I was once a Vorlith, but now, I am something else." The team stood frozen, disbelief sweeping over them. Was this the ally they had been promised? A former Vorlith, now willing to fight against its own people? Could it really be true? "Why should we trust you?" Captain Tran demanded, her hand hovering over her weapon. Calyx's eyes met hers. "Because you are not the only ones fighting for survival. I want to see the Vorlith fall just as much as you do. And I can help you." But the words carried a weight. The question remained, could they trust this former enemy, or was this just another layer of the trap they'd unwittingly walked into? The air in the silent chamber hung heavy with tension. The team stood before Calyx, the once Vorlith, now something else, something between. His humanoid form was unsettling, not because of his appearance, but because of the deep scar running through his chest, an old wound that appeared to be healing slowly, too slowly for a Vorlith. His eyes, once a pale, nearly colorless white, were now tinged with a dull blue, the remnants of a transformation that had broken him free from the control of his species. "You're asking us to trust you," Captain Mia Tran's voice was icy, challenging, every syllable weighed with suspicion. She wasn't foolish enough to let down her guard. Trust had to be earned, especially when it came from the enemy. "But why should we? You were part of the ones who destroyed our cities, wiped out entire populations. We've seen what Vorlith can do." Calyx's gaze didn't flinch. He stood in the middle of the strange, shifting corridor, his presence commanding the space. "I know what you think of my people," he replied, his voice carrying an ancient, resigned weight. "I was once one of them. But that was before I saw the truth, before I realized what we were truly becoming." "Stop," Kale Draven interrupted, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "What do you mean, becoming? You're saying you changed? Vorlith don't change. You're a superior species, impervious to time and death. You've been around for millennia. Why would you suddenly care about us?" Calyx's eyes shifted as he stepped closer, his gaze locking with Kale's. "I didn't change. We changed. The Vorlith you know are not the Vorlith I was born into. We are no longer the gods you imagine us to be. The Vorlith are being driven by something darker. And it's consuming us all." The revelation struck like a thunderclap. The Vorlith, the seemingly unstoppable force that had reduced entire civilizations to ash, were not as invincible as humanity had believed. The idea that the aliens were being manipulated by a darker force, something beyond even their own control, was both terrifying and maddening. "What are you talking about?" Captain Tran demanded, her hand tightening around the grip of her sidearm, though she didn't draw it. "Are you saying there's something else controlling them? A higher power, a force within their ranks?" Calyx nodded, his voice low and heavy with regret. "Yes. There is a force within the Vorlith, something older than our species, an entity that has infiltrated our minds, bending us to its will. We call it Shaker, a being of pure destruction, whose sole purpose is to end all life that it deems unworthy. The Vorlith are its vessels." The words left the air thick with horror, and for the first time, the team could see something resembling fear in Calyx's eyes. Fear that mirrored their own. This was not a battle for survival, it was a race against a force that was consuming everything in its path. "What happened to you?" Kale asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. "How did you escape their control? If you were one of them, if they're all like that, how did you get away?" Calyx's eyes darkened as he glanced at his own chest, where the wound was still slowly healing. "I was one of the Vorlith elite. I served at the highest levels of their military, until I discovered the truth. Shaker had taken hold of our leaders, driving us toward the end of all things. But I fought back. I resisted. And for that I was cast out, wounded. Alone." The team remained silent, processing the enormity of what Calyx was claiming. The Vorlith were not just invaders, they were victims of something far worse. And now, a former Vorlith had come to them, offering knowledge, power, and an opportunity to fight back. But Calyx's alliance came at a price. "I can help you," he said, voice full of quiet conviction. "I can show you how to infiltrate the Atheron's core, how to disable the power that drives the Vorlith. But you must understand something. Shaker will not let me go easily. If you align with me, you risk everything. The Vorlith will come for you, and they will come for you with everything they have." The room fell silent as Erica, Kale, and the others exchanged glances. The stakes had just become far greater. An alliance with Calyx could change the course of the war, but it also opened a dangerous path. Their enemies were no longer just an external force. They were dealing with a malevolent, unseen power that had taken control of the Vorlith. "This is madness," Lieutenant Emily Graves muttered, running her hand through her short-cropped hair. "We're already fighting the Vorlith and their fleet. Now you're telling us that Shaker is pulling the strings from behind the scenes." "Yes," Calyx confirmed, his voice cold but resolute. "And if you want any chance of defeating the Vorlith, you need to understand that we're not just facing their military might. We're facing an intelligence so ancient and so powerful, it could destroy everything you hold dear with a mere thought." Captain Tran clenched her fists. "How do we stop it?" Calyx didn't flinch. "There is only one way. We need to find the Shakeress anchor, a vessel, a core, something that binds its essence to this reality. Without it, the Vorlith will be like puppets without strings. If you destroy that core, you will free the Vorlith from its grip. But if you fail..." The implication was clear. Failure would mean the end of everything, not just for Earth but for every living being caught in the Vorlith's web. Erica finally spoke, her voice calm yet filled with determination. "We don't have the luxury of failure. We'll take the risk. We'll follow your lead. But understand this, if you're lying, if this is a trap..." "I am not lying," Calyx interrupted, his tone as firm as steel. "I want the Vorlith to fall just as much as you do. And I will do everything in my power to help you." For a moment they simply stared at each other, the weight of the decision settling on them. There was no turning back now. The fight for humanity's survival had just become far more complicated. But Calyx was right about one thing. There was no choice but to move forward. The battle had just shifted into a new phase, one where the enemy was not only outside, but also lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike. And the price of victory was no longer just a matter of military might. It was a war for the very soul of the Vorlith themselves. The tension inside the shuttle was palpable as it sliced through space toward the heart of the Vorlith fleet. Commander Erica Hayes, Captain Mia Tran, and the rest of the infiltration team were all aboard, traveling under the cover of Calyx's guidance. He had promised them a way into the Atheron, the Vorlith flagship, but the deeper they ventured, the more questions they had, and the more the unknown seemed to grow. Calyx's knowledge of the Vorlith warship was invaluable. Every twist and turn of the ship's labyrinthine halls, every security system and every enemy patrol had been mapped out by him. He had once been a Vorlith officer, perhaps the only one who could navigate the vast, unknowable structure. And now he was their guide, their reluctant ally in the war to save humanity. "We're getting close," Captain Tran said, her voice low as she surveyed the darkened path ahead. The shuttle was drifting toward a hidden docking bay, one known only to Calyx. "What exactly are we looking for inside the Atheron, Calyx? You said you could help us defeat Shaker, but how do we do that once we're in?" Calyx's gaze grew distant, haunted. He was always calm, but this question seemed to unsettle him. "Shaker is not a thing you can simply shoot or destroy. It's not a physical enemy, it's a consciousness, an intelligence that has infected every aspect of the Vorlith." He paused, his voice soft but chilling. "I've seen what it can do. It warps minds, bends reality to its will. The Atheron is the vessel where its influence is at its strongest. Inside there is a central node, the core. Destroy it, and you sever Shakeress influence over the Vorlith. But how do we even get close to this core?" Cale Draven asked, the skepticism in his voice evident. "The Atheron is a fortress. Even with your help, we don't know if we'll get past their security systems, or the Vorlith themselves." "There's a way," Calyx replied, his eyes dark. "But it's not going to be easy. We have to enter the heart of the ship, the Atheron's central command nexus. There, the core is hidden deep within the ship's neural network. Shakeress influence is strongest there, feeding off the ship's systems." The words sounded almost like a death sentence. If their mission failed, humanity's last line of defense would crumble. If they were caught, they would never get out. "I've seen Shakeress reach," Calyx continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Once it's found a mind to control, it wraps itself around it like a parasite. The Vorlith I knew are long gone. The ones you see today are no more than puppets." Erica stared at Calyx for a long moment, absorbing the weight of what he was saying. The Vorlith were not the enemy anymore. Shaker was. But how could they defeat something so insidious, so embedded into the very fabric of the Vorlith Empire? Calyx was right. There was no physical fight, no way to kill it in the traditional sense. It was a force of will, an entity that lived in the minds of its victims. "We don't have much time," Captain Tran said, cutting through the silence. "If we're going to get close to this core, we'll need a distraction. Something that pulls their attention away from us." Erica nodded. "The Vorlith fleet is distracted by our remaining forces. But that won't last forever. We'll have one shot at this. Let's move. The team exited the shuttle, their footsteps echoing in the cold emptiness of the Atheron's docking bay. The vast ship stretched out in all directions, its smooth, alien architecture looming over them. It was silent, unsettlingly so. Despite the ship's size, it felt deserted, as if the Vorlith had long since grown indifferent to its interior. Yet there was no denying the pulse of power that emanated from deep within the ship. Calyx led them through the twisting corridors, taking advantage of the knowledge he had once used to command this very vessel. His steps were measured, purposeful. The further they ventured, the more alien the ship became. The walls seemed to warp unnaturally, bending and shifting in ways that defied all logic. It was as though the ship itself was alive, its very structure shifting to accommodate Shaker's presence. You said the core is embedded in the neural network of the ship, Erica said, her eyes darting around the darkened hallways. Is there any way to disable the ship's defenses without triggering alarms? There is, Calyx replied. But it's not something that can be done easily. The core and the ship's systems are intertwined. If we disrupt it, we risk destabilizing the entire ship. We don't have a choice, Erica said, her voice resolute. We need to get to the core. We stopped Shaker now, or humanity has no future. The team moved quickly, their every step taken in a precise and coordinated manner. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for the haunting sense of dread that filled the air. The Atheron was no ordinary warship. It was a prison, a trap, and at its heart the entity that controlled everything was waiting. They reached the central hub of the Atheron, an enormous chamber at the core of the ship. It was more a cathedral than a command center, its walls covered in shifting patterns of light that seemed to pulse with the very life of the ship. The air was thick, charged with energy, and every step they took seemed to reverberate in the room. And in the center of it all, at the very heart of the Atheron, was a massive, glowing node, pulsating with a sickly, unnatural light. That's it, Kale whispered. The core. But as they approached, the ship seemed to react. The walls shimmered, and an eerie hum began to fill the chamber, growing louder by the second. It was as though the ship itself was aware of their presence. Calyx's expression darkened. Shaker is awakening. A low, distorted voice suddenly reverberated through the room, seeping into their minds, cold and malignant. You are too late, humans. The end is already written. All will be consumed. The team froze, the weight of the voice pressing against their minds. The air felt suffocating, thick with malevolent energy. We can't let it take control, Calyx said, his voice strained. We have to destroy the core, or Shaker will use it to spread its influence across the universe. Erica gritted her teeth, reaching for the weapon at her side. Then let's finish this. The battle for Earth had shifted once more. Now they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the soul of the universe itself. And the stakes had never been higher. The air in the central chamber of the Atheron was thick with an unnatural, suffocating energy, as though the ship itself had become aware of the infiltration. The faint, ever-present hum of the ship's systems had turned into a dissonant, throbbing pulse, vibrating through the very walls. As the team advanced toward the core, the eerie sensation of being watched by something far greater than they could comprehend pressed on them from every direction. The glowing core at the center of the chamber pulsed with a sickly light, its surface shimmering like liquid metal, alive with swirling energy. It was as if the very heart of the Vorlith ship had become a conduit for something far darker, more insidious than the Vorlith themselves. Shaker is waking, Calyx muttered under his breath, his gaze fixed on the core. His words were not a warning but a grim acceptance. He had spent years fighting to escape the entity's grasp, and now, standing here in the heart of the Atheron, he knew that the time had come to face it directly. The distorted voice of Shaker echoed again in their minds, a low, sinister rasp that made their skin crawl. You cannot stop me. I have already spread my influence through the stars. The Vorlith are mine to command, and your resistance is but a fleeting whisper. Calyx's expression twisted in something akin to hatred. It's too late for that. Shaker doesn't control me anymore. And it won't control you. Erica gripped her weapon tightly, the weight of their mission settling heavily in her chest. This is it, she thought. There was no turning back now. They had come this far, and if they failed here, everything humanity had fought for, everything they had suffered through, would have been in vain. We need to destroy the core, she said firmly, her eyes scanning the chamber, looking for any sign of an approach that would guarantee success. Calyx, can we disrupt its energy flow? Anything that might weaken it? Calyx's eyes flickered toward the core, his brow furrowing in concentration. The core is connected to the ship's entire neural network. If we sever the connection, the Vorlith's control will be broken, and Shaker will lose its hold. But there is one problem. The core is constantly feeding Shaker's essence into the Vorlith fleet. If we destroy it directly, it could collapse the Atheron and any ship linked to it. We would be risking everything. We don't have a choice, Captain Tran said, her voice unwavering. We're already risking everything just by being here. If we don't stop it now, the Vorlith will continue their march across the galaxy, and Shaker will devour every planet in its path. Calyx didn't respond immediately. He stared at the core, eyes flickering with some inner conflict. There was a cost to this, a price he was reluctant to pay. He had once served the Vorlith, had once believed in their cause. Now, standing before the embodiment of the power that controlled them, Calyx's mind wrestled with a truth he had long buried. Finally he nodded. We'll need to bypass the secondary shielding around the core. There are conduits beneath the central chamber. If we can get to them and overload the system, we can force a shutdown. Erica nodded sharply. Then let's move. The team sprinted toward the edge of the chamber, where a series of maintenance tunnels led deeper into the ship's lower levels. They navigated through the winding corridors with Calyx's guidance, trying to avoid detection by the Vorlith sentries that patrolled the halls, though the alien ship was eerily silent, as if something was lurking, waiting. Every step brought them closer to their objective, but the oppressive presence of Shaker seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. The entity's voice continued to invade their minds, a constant whisper of dread and inevitability. You are too late. You cannot escape. All of you are mine. Kale, who had been increasingly tense as they ventured deeper into the bowels of the ship, gritted his teeth. This thing, it's everywhere. It's in our heads. I can feel it. Calyx's eyes hardened. Stay strong. It's trying to break you, but you must resist. If you let it inside your mind, you will be lost. Trust me, I've seen it happen to others. As they approached the conduit junction, the dim glow of the ship's internal lights flickered, and a deep mechanical hum echoed through the walls. Something was wrong. The walls began to shudder, and the temperature in the chamber spiked, warning alarms ringing in the distance. It knows we're here, Calyx said grimly. It's trying to stop us. Suddenly, the walls of the corridor seemed to warp, rippling like liquid. A shadow moved across the far wall, and a massive, armored Vorlith warrior stepped into view, its eyes glowing with a malicious red light. It wasn't acting on its own, it was Shaker controlling it, bending the Vorlith to its will. Get down? Captain Tran shouted, pushing Erica to the side as the Vorlith warrior raised its weapon. The shot rang out, and Erica instinctively ducked, narrowly avoiding the burst of energy that would have obliterated her. The team scrambled for cover, but there was no escaping the Vorlith warrior's assault. Kale, quick to react, fired his plasma rifle at the advancing Vorlith. His shot hit the creature square in the chest, but it didn't even slow it down. The Vorlith continued its relentless advance, unaffected by the weapon's fire. It was as if it didn't feel pain anymore, only the command of its dark master. Shaker has taken control of everything, Calyx said, his voice cold with realization. The Vorlith soldiers are just puppets now, no longer capable of independent thought. We need to push forward, Erica said, trying to block out the creeping sense of despair. We can't let it stop us now. With Calyx's guidance, they moved to flank the Vorlith warrior, taking advantage of its single-minded focus on the incoming threat. They worked as a well-oiled team, using their training to overcome the Vorlith's strength and armor. Captain Tran landed a precise shot that disabled the warrior's central processor, and it collapsed to the floor, motionless. But that was just the beginning. The hum of the ship's systems grew louder, and more Vorlith warriors, more shadows under Shaker's control, emerged from the dark hallways, drawn to their position. We don't have much time, Calyx urged. The core is vulnerable now. But we must destroy it before Shaker can send reinforcements. The time for hesitation was over. Their path was clear. Destroy the core, sever Shaker's hold on the Vorlith, and with luck shatter the very heart of the enemy. The countdown had begun. The air was electric with tension, thick with the oppressive weight of the warship's ever-present hum and the ominous presence of Shaker. The deeper they pressed into the Atheron, the stronger the pull of the entity became. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with the malevolent force that controlled the Vorlith, an energy that felt alive, watching, waiting. The team moved swiftly through the darkened corridors, hearts pounding as they neared the conduit junction where they would attempt to disable the core's shielding. Their every step was calculated, driven by a singular purpose: to stop Shaker, to free the Vorlith from its grasp, and to save humanity from annihilation. But with each passing moment the sense of urgency grew. Calyx led them, his gaze never wavering from the path ahead. His sharp mind had once guided the Vorlith in military strategy. Now it was all that stood between them and total failure. But even he couldn't deny the mounting dread that grew as they approached the heart of the ship. "There's no turning back," Calyx muttered under his breath. "Once we trigger the shutdown sequence, the Atheron will begin to destabilize. Everything will be compromised." Erica nodded, her jaw set in grim determination. "Then we make it count. There's no second chance." Suddenly, a loud, resonant shriek filled the corridor. The ship seemed to shift again as if it were alive, reacting to their intrusion. The walls distorted in a ripple of light, and then from the shifting shadows, the Vorlith warriors emerged once more, darker, more vicious than before. Their eyes glowed with the unmistakable red hue of Chakaress influence. These were no longer soldiers. They were puppets, mindless vessels of destruction, driven by an intelligence far more ancient and far more dangerous than any Vorlith they had encountered before. "They're coming," Kale said, voice tight with frustration. "And they don't seem like they'll be stopping." "Then let's make it fast," Captain Tran growled, stepping forward, weapon raised. The battle began in an instant. The Vorlith warriors surged forward, their heavy boots pounding against the floor, their weapons crackling with deadly energy. The team fought back with all the training and skill they had honed over the years. Kale and Erica flanked the group, firing into the oncoming mass of enemies with precise shots that sent Vorlith crashing to the floor. But for every one they took down, two more seemed to take its place. The soldiers were relentless. They didn't feel pain, they didn't hesitate. They fought with only one purpose: to protect Chakaress' hold on the ship. "We're losing ground," Kale shouted, ducking behind cover as a blast of energy grazed his arm. "We can't let them slow us down," Erica said, gritting her teeth. "Keep moving forward. We're almost there." Calyx's voice rang out, a sharp command that cut through the chaos. "The conduits are just ahead. We need to disable the secondary power grid. It's our only chance to open the core's defenses." With one last push, the team surged forward, tearing through the remaining Vorlith warriors with a combination of calculated fire and brute force. They reached the junction just in time, ducking into a maintenance alcove as the enemy closed in on them from all sides. Captain Tran's eyes met Erica's for a split second. There was no fear, only resolve. "Get to the terminal," Tran ordered, "and hack into the power grid. We don't have much time." Erica didn't hesitate. She darted to the terminal, fingers flying over the console as she bypassed security protocols and entered the necessary codes. The system was alien, and it took everything she had to stay focused under the pressure. But finally, with a sharp click, she saw the power grid flicker on the screen. "Got it?" she breathed, her heart pounding as the alarms began to blare louder. "I'm sending the shutdown sequence. It should destabilize the core's connection to the ship's systems." But just as she hit the final command, a voice, louder and more powerful than before, reverberated through the chamber, rattling their very bones. "You are nothing. Your resistance is futile. I will consume you all as I have consumed the Vorlith." The walls of the chamber warped and distorted, stretching unnaturally as Chakaress' influence pressed in from all directions. It was as if the ship itself had become a conduit for the entity's power, a vessel of dark energy beyond anything the team had ever faced. Erica staggered back, her head spinning. Chakar was attacking their minds, warping their perceptions, trying to break their resolve. "Focus," Calyx shouted, his voice cutting through the distortion. "Chakar feeds off fear and doubt. You must push it out of your minds or you'll be lost." The weight of Chakaress' presence grew unbearable, as if the very ship was bending under its control. Erica closed her eyes for a moment, taking in a deep breath, pushing away the voice, the fear, the overwhelming presence of the entity. They had come this far. They could not, would not, fail now. With a final, trembling hand, Erica slammed the button. The room was instantly flooded with a blinding light as the core's shielding faltered, the ship's systems fighting to maintain their hold. The walls shook violently, and the alarms redoubled their frantic wail. But there was no stopping it now. The shutdown sequence was irreversible. A sudden explosion of energy pulsed outward, rattling the chamber. The Vorlith warriors that had been closing in on them stopped in their tracks, their glowing eyes dimming, and their bodies collapsing lifeless. The influence of Chakar flickered and sputtered, its hold on the Vorlith severed. The oppressive hum of the ship began to dissipate, replaced by the eerie silence of a world just on the verge of collapse. "We did it," Kale said, his voice disbelieving as he looked around at the fallen enemies. Calyx stood tall, a sense of something like relief settling over him for the first time in what felt like an eternity. For now. Shaker is still a force to be reckoned with, but this victory will give the Vorlith a chance to break free from its grip. Erica wiped the sweat from her brow, looking at the core now flickering with unstable energy. The Atheron was beginning to collapse in on itself. They had to move quickly. The ship's going to come apart. Captain Tran shouted, urgency rising in her voice. We need to get out of here. Without another word, they turned and began sprinting toward the nearest exit. The Atheron was no longer a fortress of power. It was dying, and with it, the dark grip of Shaker. But they couldn't linger long enough to savor the moment. The countdown to escape had begun. As they raced through the collapsing corridors, the team knew one thing for certain. This battle was far from over. The war had just taken an unexpected turn, and they had no choice but to keep fighting, to keep running, to survive. The corridors of the Atheron were now a chaotic nightmare. The once imposing warship, full of deadly precision and cold efficiency, was beginning to crack and groan as its systems failed. Sparks flew from ruptured conduits, lights flickered and died, and the entire structure of the ship seemed to be buckling under the weight of the destruction they had wrought. But even as the walls trembled and alarms blared, the team did not stop. Their every footfall was a heartbeat, every breath a countdown to their survival. The Atheron was collapsing, and with it, their chance to escape was shrinking by the second. We're almost there. Captain Tran shouted, her voice a harsh whisper over the noise. Her eyes were fixed on the final exit. One of the escape pods, their last hope of getting out before the Atheron's descent into total destruction. The ship was on the verge of self-detonation, and they could feel it, a palpable sense of inevitability that surrounded them like a storm. Calyx, ever the strategist, led the way. His eyes darted back and forth, always calculating, always vigilant. His mind, so used to analyzing tactics and formulating plans, was now set only on one thing: survival. Don't stop, he urged. Stay together. Don't let Shaker. He broke off, eyes narrowing. His expression darkened, and for the first time the team saw real fear in his gaze. The air around them grew colder, heavier, as if the ship itself was fighting them, writhing and twisting, almost as if it were alive, desperate to stop them. The whispers of Shaker returned, louder now, crawling beneath their skin. You cannot run from me. I will consume you all. You belong to me now. You are mine. Erica gritted her teeth, shaking off the voice that echoed inside her head. The entity was weakening, but its presence was still terrifying, omnipresent. Every step forward felt like wading through thick, oppressive mud. Her heart was a drumbeat in her chest, each thud reminding her how little time they had left. We're not going to be stopped now, Erica said, more to herself than to the others. But the truth rang clear. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a fight for the soul of the galaxy. For the future. The ship lurched, sending them sprawling as a sudden explosion rattled the entire structure. A nearby wall cracked open, releasing a torrent of sparks and toxic smoke into the air. The floor beneath their feet groaned as the ship's integrity weakened further. Move. Move. Captain Tran barked, grabbing Erica by the arm and yanking her toward the escape pod. They pushed forward, but the ship's response to their progress became increasingly violent. The corridors had once seemed like a labyrinth of alien design, but now they were a maze of broken beams, warped metal, and damaged systems. Even the Vorlith warriors, once seemingly unstoppable, lay in piles of inert bodies. With the core destroyed, the entity's power over them had dissipated, but it still wasn't enough. They could still feel its presence lingering, creeping, waiting. And then they heard it, the deep, booming echo of 1,000 voices in unison, an overwhelming psychic wave that reverberated through their very minds. You cannot escape me, children of Earth. You will all die. I will be the end of you. The ship shuddered once more, and a loud, sickening crack split the air. The corridor ahead of them was torn apart, and from the churning wreckage, something massive emerged, Shaker's final form. It was no longer just a presence, no longer an entity of influence. It had taken shape, manifested physically in a form unlike anything the team could comprehend. It towered over them, an amalgamation of shadows and energy, its form constantly shifting as though it were made of liquid darkness. Its eyes, bright and burning, fixed on them with an unnatural hunger, and from its mouth came the terrible rasp that was no longer a whisper, but a roar. You will pay the price for your defiance. You will be the last to fall. The team skidded to a halt. They were trapped. No choice, Calyx said, his voice steady, though the look in his eyes betrayed the weight of the moment. We take the fight to it. It won't stop until we are all gone. Get to the pod. Captain Tran shouted, her voice sharp as she scanned the scene. We'll hold it off. Go. No. We fight. Kale's voice was firm, his weapon aimed squarely at the monstrous entity. The others nodded. There was no more running. The escape pod was mere steps away, but they would not leave until they had fought to the end. They had made it this far. Calyx looked at them all, each of their faces lit by the flickering light of their weapons. Then let's make it count. The air crackled as Shaker surged forward, tendrils of dark energy lashing out to strike. Captain Tran fired first, a blast of plasma hitting the mass of darkness, but it did little more than scorch the entity's surface, which seemed to heal instantly. The entity roared again, slamming its shadowy appendages against the walls, sending shockwaves through the ship. The team dove for cover as it struck again, splintering the walls with impossible force. Kale fired his plasma rifle in rapid succession, each shot hitting with precision. Erica's own weapon flared to life as she released a volley of fire, but each attack felt like throwing a pebble at a tidal wave. But even as Shaker attacked, it hesitated. For a split second, it faltered, recognizing the fire and defiance that had burned in their hearts despite the odds. It was enough. Now! Calyx yelled, his hand extending toward a control panel on the wall. With a surge of effort, he activated the emergency override, and the escape pod's hatch hissed open. Get in. Tran shouted, her voice thunderous over the sound of collapsing metal and energy blasts. They ran. The ground beneath them trembled as Shaker roared in fury, its form swirling and twisting in the wake of their defiance. The pod's hatch closed behind them with a metallic thud, and the small craft launched, propelled by an emergency thruster that barely fought against the ship's overwhelming gravitational pull. As the Atheron's massive form began to break apart in the distance, a final burst of energy erupted from the core of the ship. A brilliant explosion of light flooded the dark expanse of space, and for one long, terrible moment, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. And then it was gone. The team sat in silence in the pod, their breathing ragged, hearts still racing. They had survived. Barely. Captain Tran looked around at them, her gaze filled with both relief and grim understanding. This isn't over. But we have a chance now. A real one. Calyx leaned back in his seat, his eyes closing for a moment as the weight of their escape settled in. Shaker may be gone for now, but it will never truly be vanquished. Not until we reach its source. And we will, Erica said, her voice firm, eyes steely. We'll finish this. For Earth. For everyone. And in the cold silence of deep space, as the escape pod carried them away, they knew that the war was far from over. But for the first time they had hope. And that hope, fueled by their defiance, was the spark that could light the way to victory.